G'day. Today we're back on talking about Ram trucks and specifically fitting new suspension to my Ram 3500. This is a third gen Ram, 5.9 Cummins, common rail, turbo diesel. Long box with the, at factory was optioned with the Mopar heavy duty suspension. Now I've had this truck for a bit over a year, it's been good. Coming up for a roadworthy inspection in Australia, which we do annually, and wanted to change over the shock absorbers and some steering components. So I've done sway bar, end links, I've done some bushing work. Also want to change out the shocks. These shocks are Bilstein 5100s. So they're fitted, they're in, and we're going to take the truck for a run and we're going to get first impressions. Now, where I live is out on a farm. I do about 10 kilometers of dirt to get into town each day. And the road is in shocking condition at the moment. We've come through a very, very hot and dry summer and the road is atrocious. A lot of ruts. We had a storm a little while ago. We got a couple of washouts in the road, but the corrugations in the road are just diabolically bad. It got so bad that my wife said, look, can we do something about making the cars a bit better? And her shocks were shot in her 100 Series Landcruiser, so I've changed them out. If you want a comparison, it's not the same vehicle, I acknowledge that, sorry. But if you want some impressions of 4900 Series Bilstein shock, that's what I put in the Landcruiser, 5100s in here, and that'll give you a little bit of comparison and very different reviews. My impressions of between the two vehicles are very, very different in taking them for a first drive. So taking this one out and we've given it a run. I'll show you the video of that, the first impressions after fitting it, and you can see what I thought. Now, the 5100 Bilstein was principally purchased, it's a quality shock. Look, I would love to run, Fox shocks or something with a remote reservoir. I couldn't justify that expense, and the Bilstein 5100s to me landed to my door was about it was under $500 order Australian, which to me is just astonishing value for a shock of that quality. Couldn't get near that purchasing those shocks in Australia. Fitted them myself. I do have a video of how to get the shock changed on the driver's side on a right-hand drive vehicle, because there's a little idiosyncrasy with that you need to be aware of, so check that out if you're going to do that. But this video is principally designed to give you an idea of what my perception is of the 5100 series shock, to see if that's something that is right for you. Now, I have retained the factory springs, which most of the things I've read online, they said, look, you're going to fit Bilsteins and get a better ride, change out the springs, because you're not going to get, I've had some people, you're not going to get the full benefit if you don't run upgraded springs, and I've had some people read some people's comments saying you won't get any benefit if you don't run upgraded springs. Well, I haven't chosen to change the springs over. I said I got the specs sheet on for the truck when it was released, and it had been optioned with the heavy duty suspension, so I thought, well, we'll just leave the factory heavy coils in place and we'll see how we go. And this will give you an impression of the only change. There's some steering component change, which I noticed on the first drive, and but the only change to the suspension setup was the 5100 series shock absorbers. I did also fit a 5100 series steering damper, and the steering damper that came off this, a Pro Comp steering damper that came off this truck, was absolutely cactus. It was stuffed. So, I'll make some comments as I drive along on the steering improvement, but my impressions of the first drive will be up next, and I hope this is of use to you, and that if you're considering upgrading your shock absorbers on your Ram, that my thoughts on first drive will be useful to you. Thanks for watching. G'day, welcome back. I've restarted the video actually. Took off did a bit of a drive around and really wanted to just go back around the loop again before I started re-recording, because the difference in this vehicle from pre-shock absorbers to now is astonishing. It really is, and I didn't think that I had it right. I thought, maybe I should just spend a bit more time with it before I put my decision, my review, if you like, down on tape. But it's quite an astonishing transformation. And the reason I say that is previously I had been content to say that this truck, you were going to take a hit with it. You're just going to take a hit with it. When I first drove it, I went, yeah, it feels like an old generation ute. It feels like a ute that has old suspension. And I figured as 2005, that's what it's going to feel like. It felt a bit like when you drive, a current spec Ranger, and then you go back to like a Courier, Ford Courier, and you go, geez, utes have really come a long way. I drove this for the first time and thought, wow, that's probably what it's going to be like. 2005 design suspension compared to something that's a bit more modern. You're going to take a bit of a hit in it. It was very skittish. Lots of body roll, but and really noticed bumps when you went over ruts. When you went through, like I'm doing now, driving down a dirt road, you really noticed it. It really let you know what I thought, that it was an old suspension design. And I felt that, like, this is astonishing. This is a really bad service. Our roads are all washed out and terrible at the moment. Same that I explained on the Toyota Landcruiser video. This is just amazing. This feels better than the 100 series on this dirt surface, if I was honest, which is quite astonishing. I've taken it out on the bitumen and it's greatly improved there too. It's not as good as the 100 series, but this is a vast difference. I wouldn't have thought the difference would be that pronounced, considering all I did was change over the suspension. I haven't changed the springs. These are the original springs, and most people will assert to you don't change the springs, you're not going to get the full benefit. Now, I haven't changed the springs, so I wasn't expecting to get the full benefit. But this is a really big change. This is going to change my perception of driving this truck around, to be honest with you. Like, when we go away, the Landcruiser is better on long distance trips, and it still will be on bitumen. It still will be a more comfortable vehicle to drive than this on the highway, because it's a wagon. It doesn't have to have dialed in 3500 suspension, which is designed to tow a really big lot of weight. So the Landcruiser is going to be naturally more comfortable than this is going to be. But having said that, the difference has narrowed considerably. The difference between the 100 series and this truck was a lot bigger. It's got a lot narrower. This has really made a big change. And I suppose I'm so surprised because I fit the 4600s to my 100 series Landcruiser and was thoroughly underwhelmed. Now, as time has gone on, I felt that they're probably a bit better than maybe I initially reviewed them, but I'd have to say I'm still fairly disappointed in terms of it really didn't make the profound change I thought they would. It is a change, but it's not as big as I thought. I've been quite thoroughly unimpressed. Well, not unimpressed, but let's say disappointed with the lack of performance gain with the 4600s. Whereas with this, the change on this truck is vastly different. This has really made a really, really big difference, which is why I was inclined to hold off doing a video and just doing a little bit more driving before I did it, because it really baffles my the experience I had with the Landcruiser compared to the experience with this is vastly different. So if you've got a Ram and you're thinking you want to put some new shock absorbers in it based off this, and I've been driving this thing around for the last hour or so, I would thoroughly recommend getting Bilstein 5100s. This is just fantastic. Compared to what it was, you wouldn't think that such a difference was made. You really wouldn't. It's quite remarkable. So I'm really thrilled. So what this had in it previously, as I covered before, it had Bilstein heavy duty suspension, heavy duty springs, option from factory. I can't find any evidence in the manual that they'd been changed since new, so I assume they have not. I assume that they're still the factory shocks, and so they've done circa 200,000 Ks. But the difference here is profound. It really, really is. It's smoother. It can handle the ruts better. This thing really used to crash and bang a lot, but this has transformed the ride. It really has. So this is quite remarkable. I'm quite taken, as you can tell. And as I said, it's principally because my experience with the 4600s wasn't that great. I'll be honest, it wasn't that great. And I was kind of thinking that I was probably going to be let down again, if I was honest. The disappointing thing with this is that I wish that Bilstein made a set of 5100s for the 100 Series Landcruiser, because if they did, I would go and buy a set and whack them in the 100 Series and see if that made a difference. If it's the suspension settings in the shock absorber itself that's made the difference, or is it simply that maybe I need to change the springs over in the 100 Series to get the full impact. But in this truck, with the standard springs from new, just heavy duty springs, and granted that was optioned in, this is a very, very pleasant thing to drive now. And as I said, when I bought it, I just figured that I was going to take a hit on suspension, on comfort and ride. I thought that was just baked into the cake, but this has really altered my thinking on it. I've driven a current generation 1500. I haven't driven the current generation 25 or 3500, but I have driven a 1500, and I would be bold enough to say that this is relatively comparable to the ride in the 1500. The back end is stiffer, but you would expect that with a 3500 over a 1500. The suspension design in here is, it's completely different to the 1500. But the front end, how the front end feels, it is quite comparable. I have put a 5100 series steering damper in this as well, and the steering does feel better. The steering is distinctly better. I've done bushing, I put a damper in it, and the steering is a lot better as well. I've also adjusted the track bar so the steering wheel sits level now, but the steering does feel a lot better than it did. So, but that I can purely pin down to the fact that old steering damper that I had on this thing was absolutely and categorically shot. It was absolutely stuffed. I would have been disappointed if there wasn't a marked improvement going to the 5100 series steering damper. So there you go. We're back on the bitumen now, and it's, it was never terrible but it was bouncier on the bit. When you hit a bump, you really knew about it. Whereas this has really taken a lot of that sudden jar out of some of those big bumps, has really taken that out. It's a very, very pleasant ride. So there you go. I hope that was useful for you. This was a long video because we covered off on a bit of fitting stuff as well as the driving review. But I hope this has been useful. I hope it's been interesting. The Bilstein 5100s get a thumbs up from me. And if that changes, if they don't wear particularly well, watch the channel. If there's any updates in the next few months or out a year, I will update it if they don't wear particularly well. But as of this moment, they're amazing. Profound difference. Thanks for watching.